I was born in a small, forgotten town, the kind where everyone knows your name and, more importantly, your business. My dad left when I was 7, leaving my mom to work 3 jobs just to keep us afloat. We scraped by, but dreams felt like distant fantasies, reserved for a people who lived somewhere other than a creaky old trailer at the end of a dusty road. School was my escape. I was one of those kids who loved to read, devouring books as if each page might unlock some secret path out of this place. But no matter how hard I studied, it seemed the universe had other plans. My mom got sick when I was 17. I dropped out of school to take care of her, working nights at the local gas station and picking up odd jobs during the day. When she passed, it felt like I was adrift in a world that didn't care whether I sank or swam. But I wasn't ready to give up. With every dollar I saved, I dreamed of a new life. I bought a beat-up old car for $300, packed my things, and drove west with no plan other than leaving the past behind. The engine sputtered as I rolled into the city, a chaotic, sprawling mess with endless skyscrapers. It was intimidating, but it felt alive, full of opportunity. I took the first job I could find, cleaning tables in a small diner. From there, I worked my way up, one day at a time. My break came when I met Joe, a grizzled old contractor who ran a tiny construction firm. He liked my hustle and offered me a job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid better than the diner. I showed up early, stayed late, and soon enough, Joe trusted me with more responsibilities. It wasn't long before I learned the ins and outs of the business. Within 5 years, I'd saved up enough to buy a rundown building with the little money I had. It was a risk, a huge one, but I had faith. I fixed it up, rented out the units, and flipped it for a decent profit. That was my first real taste of success, and I was hooked. I spent the next few years flipping more properties, pouring everything I had into each one. The city started to notice my work. Word got around that I was the guy who could turn the ugliest buildings into gold. Money wasn't the problem anymore. The problem was finding time to spend it. I became a regular at fancy bars, rubbing elbows with people I once thought I'd only ever read about. But through it all, I kept to myself. I didn't want to get tangled up in the flashy lifestyle that I saw swallow up so many others. That is, until I met her, Cassandra. I'll never forget that night. It was a Friday, and I had just closed a huge deal. I decided to celebrate, so I went to one of those high-end lounges, the kind with velvet curtains and jazz bands that made you feel like you'd stepped back in time. I was sipping a scotch when she walked in. She had this effortless grace, with a smile that lit up the room. Her eyes caught mine, and before I knew it, she was sitting across from me, laughing at my terrible jokes. We talked for hours, and I was hooked. Cassandra was unlike anyone I'd ever met, smart, quick-witted, with a spark that made you feel like life had a little more color with her around. She told me she was a struggling artist, working at a gallery by day and painting by night. I was charmed by her ambition, her creative spirit, and the way she made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. For the first time in years, I let my guard down. I let her into my life, my plans, my dreams. She became my partner in everything. I'd show her the buildings I was working on, and she'd gush over my vision. She made me believe in the fairy tale, that maybe, just maybe, I could have it all: success, love, and happiness. As time passed, she started sharing her own dreams with me, dreams of opening her own art studio, of traveling the world. It was easy to say yes to helping her. I was in love, after all, and money didn't feel as important anymore when she was around. I paid off some of her debts, helped her buy art supplies, even invested in her plans to open that studio she always talked about. One night, after a dinner that probably cost more than I'd ever spent in a month back in my old life, she asked me to invest in a gallery. She had found the perfect space, a prime location, she said, with a gleam in her eyes. It would only take a little investment to make it a reality. Well, little by her standards. It was practically all the money I'd saved over the last year, but she promised me it would be worth it. And like a fool, I believed her. For a few months, everything seemed perfect. The gallery opened, and she poured herself into it, spending long nights planning exhibitions and networking with buyers. I was proud of her, proud of us. But then, little cracks started to show. And when I finally did, she was different. She had this look in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. She told me she needed space, that she was overwhelmed and needed time to think. I wanted to believe her. I really did. So I gave her the space she asked for, even though it tore me up inside. But a week later, she was gone. Not just from my life, but from the city. And with her went every cent I had invested in her dreams. The gallery was emptied out, my money along with it. Her phone number was disconnected, and the address she had given me for her apartment turned out to be fake. I was left standing there in the middle of that empty gallery, staring at the bare walls, realizing I'd been played. All my hard work, all those years of building myself up from nothing, gone, just like that. She had taken it all, leaving me with nothing but a pile of debts and a heart that felt like it had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. I didn't know how I'd been so blind, how I'd let myself fall so hard. But one thing was clear. Cassandra wasn't coming back, and I had to figure out how to pick up the pieces of the life I'd built, now that it had been turned upside down. I spent the next few weeks in a haze, wandering through life as if I were a ghost. I didn't want to face anyone, especially not my friends and family. How could I explain that the woman I loved, who I thought shared my dreams, had turned out to be a thief? The shame gnawed at me, and I buried myself in work, pouring every ounce of my energy into my business. I took on every project I could find, working late into the night, trying to distract myself from the wreckage that was my heart. But the truth was inescapable. I had to face the music. My finances were in tatters, and the weight of Cassandra's betrayal pressed down on me like a lead blanket. It was hard to sleep, hard to eat. I spent long hours lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every conversation I had with her. How could I have been so foolish? The signs were there, hidden beneath her charm and laughter. I should have noticed the way she dodged questions about her past, how she seemed to vanish whenever I asked about her family or her life before the gallery. One day, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of sulking in despair, I began to investigate. I knew her name was a facade. Cassandra was too good to be true. I spent hours at the library and online, piecing together whatever information I could find. I discovered she had used different names in various cities, always appearing just long enough to win people over before disappearing. Each revelation felt like another stab to my heart, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know who she really was. Eventually, I found a lead, a former acquaintance of hers who might have information. Her name was Linda, and she had been an artist working in the same circles as Cassandra. I tracked her down to a small coffee shop where she worked, and with a mixture of hope and dread, I approached her. At first, she was hesitant to talk. "Cassandra? I haven't heard that name in years. She goes by Cassie now," she said, her brow furrowing with concern. "But why do you want to know?" I poured out my story, every detail, the dreams I had shared with Cassandra, the heartbreak of losing everything. As I spoke, I could see the sympathy in Linda's eyes, and she nodded slowly as if she understood all too well. "I've seen her do this before," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She has a talent for playing people. Cassie's been running cons for a long time. She targets those who are vulnerable, who are looking for something more than what they have." Her words struck me like a thunderclap. I felt angry and sad at the same time. But why? What drives someone to hurt others like that? Linda sighed, looking down at her cup of coffee. Sometimes it's a way to escape their own reality. Maybe she never learned how to truly connect with anyone, so she resorts to manipulation. But it's not an excuse, just a possible explanation. I thanked Linda for her honesty and left the cafe, my heart heavy, but also strangely lighter. I had answers, and while they didn't change what had happened, they gave me a sense of closure I desperately needed. I realized that I wasn't alone in this. there were others who had fallen victim to her charm. It was comforting in a twisted sort of way. With renewed determination, I decided to rebuild. I refocused on my business, pouring everything I had into it. It was hard, but the pain transformed into motivation. I started networking again, reaching out to potential investors, and soon my properties began to flourish once more. I found pleasure in the work I had once loved, and my confidence slowly began to return. Months passed, and as I began to regain my footing, I also learned to guard my heart. I joined support groups, sharing my story with others who had experienced betrayal and loss. It was healing to connect with people who understood my pain, who validated my feelings. I found myself growing in ways I never anticipated, becoming stronger and more resilient. Then one day, while attending a gallery opening, ironically at the very venue where Cassandra had hosted her last show, I ran into an old friend, Mia. We had lost touch over the years, but she lit up when she saw me. She had heard about my rise in the real estate world and was genuinely happy for me. We struck up a conversation, reminiscing about the past, and as the evening progressed, I felt a spark of connection I hadn't felt in ages. Mia was warm, genuine, and refreshingly honest. Unlike Cassandra, she spoke about her dreams and passions without embellishment. As the night wore on, we found ourselves laughing, sharing stories of heartbreak and hope. It felt like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that not everyone was like Cassandra. There were still good people in the world, and I could learn to trust again. As weeks turned into months, Mia and I grew closer. She inspired me to embrace life fully, to move forward without the shadow of my past weighing me down. We started going to art exhibits together, discovering new restaurants, and sharing late-night talks about our dreams for the future. I still carried scars from the past, but with each day those scars became less painful, turning into a reminder of my resilience. One evening, as we walked through a park, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. I turned to Mia, and in that moment I realized how lucky I was to have found her. "You know," I said, "I was lost for a while, but you've shown me that love can be real and genuine." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the sunset. "We all have our stories, but it's how we choose to move forward that matters." As I stood there with Mia, I realized I had come full circle. From the depths of betrayal to the heights of love, I had learned invaluable lessons about trust, resilience, and the importance of being true to oneself. My heart, once shattered, had begun to mend, and I was ready for whatever the future held, this time with open eyes and an open heart. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was a survivor, and I was finally ready to embrace the life I had fought so hard to build, one filled with genuine connections and the hope of new beginnings.